Okay. Anything else, Mr. Smith?
Yes, it is. Interested in, I had put in a request from our BA in reference to RFQ mandatory requirements was over. I spoke to the secretary today. Do we have that?
The mandatory requirements?
Yes.
The mandatory requirements for all RFQs, specifically, are that there's a requirement to have the business registration certificate.
No, I wanted you to, do you have it, or you don't have it, or is it any way that you can provide me with the mandatory requirements for requests for qualification submittals?
Yes, I have.
You do have it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did our RQs all meet the mandatory requirements?
When they were reviewed, they met the mandatory requirements where, in the specific instance regarding the specific, whether it's the architect, the solicitor, the engineer, the going down the line, they all complied with the requirements as they, within their individual criteria, are required to meet them.
So I guess, in short, they did meet the mandatory minimum requirements, all of them, according to what you just gave me.
They met the mandatory minimum requirements that they, in their specific profession, are required to meet when you're going for an RFQ. Mandatory requirements in some professions, there are some specific mandatory requirements that, even though they're required in general, because of their profession, they have alternative methods of providing the information that are not specifically identified in the state's mandatory requirements. And I can go through those with you if you'd like.
I'd like to come
I
in.
can't do it here.
No,
I can meet with you.
because I'm still trying to understand that response, because I'm reading here that says applicable to all requests.
Yes, it is.
So if it's applicable to all requests, that means that there's no differences in, regardless of the services they're offering. The submittal for the requirements are mandatory, and I'm reading to all. So your answer.
To answer you, yes, they are required, but the state permits in certain cases that other form of submittal be accepted. There are some professions that are not required to submit the form that's identified, but they have an alternate manner in which they comply with what the state has identified as the requirements.
Thank you. Mr. Robert, you're willing to meet with Mr. Sargent?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Sargent, you're willing to meet with Mr. Oberg and go over that?
Yeah, because I want to see if we matched up with the mandatory requirements. His answer to me, I don't really know what it means, because I'm getting one thing that says applicable to all, but he's telling me that it doesn't really pan out that way. So I'd like to get some transparency on that.
All right. So we can agree that both of you will meet?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you both of you. Any other new business?
Yes.
Okay.
The district received a report of the findings from a Title I audit. And every board member should have a copy in their binder. In the findings, there were 29 findings overall, which can be categorized in 4 major areas. The first area is on the parental involvement, and there were issues of notification and identifying, notification to parents, identifying their child for targeted assistance. It also included appropriate notification of district-wide Title I programs, explaining the pre-K to 12 continuum services. The findings also included appropriate letters, including specific criteria for targeted assistance, informing parents of the program. And in that area, having a district-wide and school improvement plan that actively involves parents. And the second major finding, finance. Issues, there were some issues around finance, one of which was a board-approved policy for competitive contracting, and whether or not there was evidence of internal controls for the bidding process, as it related to having vendors, a list of vendors that actually qualified in the process. And so the recommended action for the finance area was to have updated internal control policies to prevent any errors from potentially occurring. The other area under financing was that we should have an inventory system of all capital assets purchased with Title I funds. And the third major area was around our English language learners and findings around clarification of programs and notification of the programs to parents. And another area in the ELL category was the use of funds to not supplant the program, but use dollars to support the English language program. In other words, we ought to be using operating dollars to support core services for English language learners and using the funds to support and not supplant core services. Historically, we were using these funds to purchase an English language learner personnel for schools, and we've since then corrected that practice. And the last major area, and actually were the major findings, most of the findings were in special education. And the major areas in special education had to do with the implementation of the IEPs for students, the placement of students in the least restrictive environment, the implementation and accessibility of the IEPs, particularly the findings were around the alternative school, Booker T. Washington, and the fact that the district did not provide, to the maximum extent, appropriate opportunities for students with disabilities to be educated with children who are not disabled. There were other major findings around special education that dealt with provision and content of notice of meetings. In other words, the district is to comply with federal timelines of notifying parents of special education needs as per the law. Well, since then, we are directed to provide training, immediate training to appropriate staff and to comply with the federal timelines. So all in all, there are 29 findings, which mostly have to do with implementation and following policies and procedures. We are expected, the district is expected to provide a corrective action plan to the state 30 days from this date. And the plan itself, the corrective action plan itself requires board approval. We will be in position to provide the board with the mandated corrective action plan as per the requirements, along with the details of who will be responsible and the time frame to meet all compliance. It is my intent to provide this board with the corrective action plan before the next conference meeting, so that board members have an opportunity to review the corrective action plan, discuss it at the next conference meeting,